Trump's new law will make the world prepare to receive the Antichrist. What I'm about to show you happened so quietly that most people missed it completely. While America celebrated what politicians called economic victory, a single signature on a single piece of legislation may have just activated the final countdown to the mark of the beast. I am going to show you 5 discoveries about Trump's new law that will make the world prepare to receive the Antichrist. Discovery 1. The day everything changed. July 18, 2025. 2:47 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. In the Oval Office, President Trump lifts his pen and signs his name on a piece of legislation that most Americans have never heard of. The Guiding and Establishing National Innovation for U.S. Stablecoins Act. The cameras flash. The politicians smile. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen calls it a landmark achievement for American financial leadership. The media coverage is overwhelmingly positive. Within hours, cryptocurrency markets surge. But here's what none of the celebration mentioned. Hidden in the 247 pages of technical regulatory language is a single provision that changes everything. A few sentences that most people will never read, buried between discussions of reserve requirements and compliance standards. Section 4.2.1 states, all stablecoin issuers operating within United States jurisdiction must maintain the technical infrastructure necessary to comply with lawful government orders regarding the freezing, seizure, or destruction of issued payment stablecoins. But the true significance of this moment goes far beyond what happened in that room. Because while President Trump was signing what he believed was economic legislation, something else was occurring that most people missed entirely. 137 countries, all implementing compatible digital currency systems, all within the same 72-hour window. And that brings us to the most chilling aspect of July 18, 2025. While politicians celebrated economic innovation and financial experts praised technological advancement, something far more significant was actually taking place. For the first time in human history, the technology now exists for universal surveillance of every financial transaction on Earth. The legal frameworks are in place for governments to control all digital commerce instantly. The international cooperation is established for coordinated economic enforcement across all major nations. Every component needed to implement the Mark of the Beast system described in Revelation 13 is now operational. The infrastructure is complete. The precedents are established. The public is conditioned. The international coordination is functional. The framework that allows instant economic exclusion was praised as ensuring financial inclusion. President Trump called it genius because he believed he was protecting American economic interests. July 18, 2025 may have been the day that choice was removed forever. You're about to discover 5 terrifying connections between this new law and the beast system of Revelation 13. And the 5th connection will reveal why this had to happen before Jesus returns. Connection 1. The power to destroy what you own. Look again at what Revelation 13:17 actually says. And that no man might buy or sell, save he that had the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name. The mark system doesn't just restrict commerce for non-compliance. It eliminates economic existence entirely for those who refuse to submit. Throughout history, persecution has always left some escape routes. Even under the most oppressive regimes, black markets existed. Alternative currencies emerged. Barter systems developed. People found ways to trade outside official channels. But the burn capability eliminates all of these historical escape routes. In modern dictatorships, Citizens use foreign currency or cryptocurrency to escape government control. But once all currency becomes digital, and once all digital currency has burn capability built into its core programming, these escape routes disappear. Now consider how this connects to biblical prophecy about forced worship. And he had power to give life unto the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak, and cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. Revelation 13:15. But here's what gives me hope, even in the face of this terrifying capability. The Bible doesn't just prophesy about the mark system's power. It also prophesies about its limitations and ultimate failure. And the smoke of their torment ascendeth up for ever and ever. And they have no rest day nor night, who worship the beast and his image, and whosoever receiveth the mark of his name. Revelation 14:11. Those who refuse the mark may lose everything on earth, but they gain everything in heaven. The choice is coming. The technology exists. The legal framework is established. The global cooperation is operational. When your digital currency is threatened with burning, unless you submit to the beast system, what will you choose? Connection 2. When enemies become allies. But here's something that should shock every student of biblical prophecy. This law passed with unprecedented bipartisan support. When was the last time you saw Republicans and Democrats agree on anything controversial? When did the House of Representatives last vote 308 members in favor of any significant legislation? The two parties seem incapable of finding common ground on even the most basic issues. Yet somehow, digital currency regulation united politicians who disagree about everything else. Instead, the vote was 308 in favor, 127 against, a 71% approval rate in the most polarized Congress in modern American history. Now compare that to what Revelation 17:13 tells us about the end times. These have one mind, and shall give their power and strength unto the beast. The Bible prophesies that world leaders who normally fight each other will mysteriously unite behind the beast system. Despite their surface disagreements about everything else, they'll have one mind when it comes to supporting the infrastructure of global control. But this prophetic unity isn't limited to America. It's happening globally on a scale that should terrify anyone who understands biblical prophecy. According to the Atlantic Council's Central Bank Digital Currency Tracker, 137 countries representing 98% of global GDP are exploring or implementing digital currencies. Think about what that means. Countries that have been at war for decades are building compatible financial systems. Nations that impose trade sanctions on each other are creating interoperable digital payment networks. Governments that can't agree on basic diplomatic protocols are harmonizing their monetary surveillance capabilities. This pattern repeats across every major geopolitical conflict zone. Nations that can't cooperate on anything else are mysteriously cooperating on digital financial infrastructure. But here's what makes this cooperation even more disturbing. It's not just happening at the government level, it's happening at the technical level, the corporate level, and the international organization level. The same financial institutions that are subject to sanctions are participating in international digital currency development through intermediary bodies. The same international organizations that can't resolve basic diplomatic disputes are successfully coordinating complex technical standards for global financial systems. It's as if the normal rules of international conflict and cooperation don't apply when it comes to building infrastructure for digital currency control. And Daniel 7:23 tells us about the scope of this unity. Thus he said, "The fourth beast shall be diverse from all the beasts that were before it, and shall devour the whole earth. and shall tread it down, and break it in pieces. Not part of the earth, not some nations, the whole earth. Universal dominion requires universal cooperation. And that's exactly what we're witnessing with digital currency adoption. And here's what makes this forced universality particularly prophetic. Look again at what Revelation 13:16-17 tells us. And he causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell, save he that had the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name. Notice the word all. Not most people, not many people, all people. Universal participation isn't optional. It's mandatory. But universal participation requires universal infrastructure. And universal infrastructure requires the kind of unprecedented international cooperation we're witnessing with digital currency implementation. For the first time in history, we're seeing global coordination specifically designed to eliminate alternative economic systems, not just to create a new system, but to ensure that no other systems can survive. Cash is being phased out through policy coordination. Precious metals are being regulated through harmonized international standards. Cryptocurrency is being controlled through coordinated regulatory frameworks. Barter systems are being monitored through digital tracking technologies. Every alternative to the official digital currency system is being systematically eliminated through international cooperation that overcomes traditional political divisions. But here's what gives me hope, even in the face of this terrifying coordination. The Bible doesn't just prophesy about the beast system's temporary success, it also prophesies about its ultimate failure and the unity that will replace it. And the seventh angel sounded, and there were great voices in heaven saying, "The kingdoms of this world are become the kingdoms of our Lord and of his Christ, and he shall reign forever and ever." Revelation 11:15. The false unity of the beast system will be replaced by the true unity of Christ's kingdom. The cooperation that serves Satan will be superseded by the cooperation that serves God. The coordination that oppresses humanity will give way to the coordination that liberates creation. The system that will enforce the mark of the beast is being coordinated by enemies who mysteriously become allies. Connection 3. The final death of financial privacy. The Genius Act isn't just about regulating digital currency. It's about eliminating the last refuge of financial privacy: cash. But here's what most people don't understand about how this elimination process actually works. It's not happening through direct government mandate. It's happening through systematic market manipulation that makes digital payments irresistibly convenient, while making cash transactions increasingly difficult, expensive, and suspicious. Let me show you exactly how this process operates, because once you understand the mechanism, you'll realize we're watching the methodical construction of a cashless society that will make the mark of the beast system inevitable. Phase 1. Digital incentivization. The Genius Act creates regulatory frameworks that make digital currency more trustworthy, more secure, and more convenient than physical cash. Stablecoin issuers now have federal backing. Digital transactions gain legal protections that cash transactions don't enjoy. Electronic payments offer rewards, benefits, and features that paper money can't provide. Why carry cash when your digital wallet offers 2% cash back on purchases? Why use physical currency when electronic payments are instant, trackable for tax purposes, and protected against theft? Why deal with paper money when digital currency can be programmed to automatically pay bills, invest surplus funds, and optimize spending patterns? The convenience isn't accidental. It's engineered to create behavioral dependency on digital systems. But convenience is only the first layer of the strategy. Phase 2. Cash penalization. While digital payments become more attractive, cash transactions become more burdensome. Banks charge fees for cash withdrawals. Merchants offer discounts for electronic payments while adding surcharges for cash transactions. Government agencies make digital payments faster and easier while creating paperwork requirements for large cash transactions. It's not that cash becomes illegal, it just becomes impractical. Consider what's already happening in pilot programs around the world. In Sweden, most businesses now refuse cash entirely. Customers who insist on paying with physical currency face longer wait times, additional fees, and limited service options. Cash transactions require special procedures, manager approval, and extra documentation. The result? Even people who prefer cash eventually switch to digital payments to avoid the hassle. In China, cash transactions are becoming so rare that some young people have never handled physical currency. Mobile payment apps like WeChat Pay and Alipay dominate all commerce. Vendors who accept cash are viewed as outdated, suspicious, or potentially criminal. But the penalization goes beyond inconvenience. It extends to social stigmatization. Phase 3. Cash suspicion. As digital payments become the norm, cash transactions begin to seem suspicious. Why would someone insist on untraceable payments unless they have something to hide? What legitimate reason exists for avoiding the security and convenience of electronic currency? But universal participation in an economic control system is only possible if alternatives are eliminated. As long as cash exists, people can still transact without the mark. As long as barter systems operate, people can still trade without digital surveillance. As long as alternative currencies function, people can still escape central control. The mark system requires the complete elimination of all alternative economic options, and cash elimination is the crucial first step in that process. Once cash disappears completely, financial anonymity disappears with it. Every purchase you make gets tracked. Every transaction you complete gets recorded. Every economic decision you make gets monitored and analyzed by algorithms that can detect patterns, predict behaviors, and identify non-compliance. But here's what makes digital currency surveillance far more sophisticated than any previous tracking system in history. The total surveillance architecture. Physical surveillance requires human observers, cameras, and physical presence. Even the most oppressive regimes couldn't monitor every transaction, every purchase, every exchange of value between individuals. Digital currency surveillance operates automatically, continuously, and comprehensively without human intervention. If your digital currency is programmed to refuse transactions for certain political donations, you can't appeal to a human decision-maker when your payment gets rejected. The algorithm makes the decision instantly based on predetermined parameters. There's no customer service representative to call, no manager to speak with, no court to petition. Your money simply stops working for purchases the system disapproves of. Now consider how this connects to the biblical description of the mark system. The mark isn't just an identification system, it's an access control system. Only those who have the mark can participate in economic activity. Everyone else is excluded automatically. Programmable digital currency creates exactly this kind of automatic exclusion mechanism. Your money can be programmed to stop working entirely if you don't have the proper identification, if you don't meet the compliance requirements, if you don't demonstrate the required loyalty to the system. No human enforcement is needed. No police raids are required. No court orders are necessary. But here's what makes this exclusion particularly cruel. It's designed to create maximum psychological pressure on non-compliant individuals and their families. One of the most effective features of programmable digital currency is its ability to create targeted pressure on mark refusers through their relationships with compliant family members. Imagine a scenario where a father refuses to take the mark, but his wife and children have accepted it to maintain their economic access. The father can't buy food, medicine, or housing because his digital currency has been deactivated for non-compliance. But his family members can still make purchases. They just can't share those resources with him because the system tracks resource transfers. Throughout history, even the most oppressive governments couldn't prevent families from sharing resources secretly. Parents could always find ways to feed their children. Spouses could always discover methods to support each other. Programmable digital currency eliminates these family support networks by making resource sharing detectable and punishable through automatic systems. For the first time in human history, refusing government compliance doesn't just risk your own welfare. It threatens everyone you care about. But here's what gives me hope, even in the face of this terrifying surveillance and control architecture. The Bible doesn't just prophesy about the mark system's power. It also promises supernatural provision for those who refuse it. And the woman fled into the wilderness, where she hath a place prepared of God, that they should feed her there 1,260 days. Revelation 12:6. While the beast system can control digital commerce, it cannot control divine provision. While programmable money can restrict earthly transactions, it cannot limit heavenly resources. While surveillance algorithms can track electronic behavior, they cannot monitor spiritual supply. God has been preparing for this exact scenario for thousands of years. The same God who fed millions of Israelites in the wilderness, who provided for Elijah during famine, who multiplied loaves and fishes, who supplied all needs according to his riches in glory. That God is not intimidated by programmable currency or surveillance algorithms. The elimination of cash makes the mark system possible. But the elimination of cash also makes divine intervention necessary. And God specializes in providing for his people when human systems fail. The choice is coming. Cash is disappearing. Digital surveillance is expanding. Programmable control is being implemented. When your financial privacy is completely eliminated, when your money can be programmed to control your behavior, when your economic survival depends on compliance with the beast system, what will you choose? Will you trust in the security of digital currency that can be destroyed instantly? Or will you trust in the provision of God that can never be taken away? The final death of financial privacy is making that choice inevitable for every person on earth. Connection 4. The false peace deception. But here's what makes this entire system so deceptively dangerous. It's being marketed as exactly the opposite of what it actually creates. Listen to how political leaders are describing the Genius Act: economic innovation, American leadership in digital assets, financial security for all Americans, technological progress that benefits everyone. It sounds like prosperity, security, and national advantage. Who could oppose economic innovation? Who would be against financial security? This perfectly fulfills the biblical prophecy about false peace before sudden destruction. For when they shall say, peace and safety, then sudden destruction cometh upon them as travail upon a woman with child, and they shall not escape. 1 Thessalonians 5:3. The mark of the beast system won't be presented as oppression. It will be presented as salvation. Not as control, but as protection. Not as enslavement, but as security. Every tyrannical system in history has sold itself as beneficial to those it seeks to control. The propaganda always emphasizes the advantages while hiding the true cost. But here's what's particularly deceptive about the current marketing campaign. The benefits are real, at least initially. Digital currency systems do offer convenience, efficiency, and certain types of security. The early adopters will experience genuine advantages. That's what makes the deception so effective. The system actually delivers on its promises for those who comply fully and quickly. It's only later, after widespread adoption, after cash alternatives disappear, after the infrastructure becomes indispensable, that the true nature of the system reveals itself. By then, it's too late to choose differently. Connection 5. The spiritual war behind the technology. Here's what most people don't understand about the mark of the beast. It's not ultimately about economics, technology, or even government control. It's about worship. And he causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell, save he that had the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name. Revelation 13:16-17. Notice the context. This passage comes immediately after describing how the world will worship the beast. The mark isn't just an economic identifier, it's a spiritual declaration. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. Ephesians 6:12. What we're witnessing isn't just political maneuvering or technological advancement. This is spiritual warfare using human institutions as weapons. Satan knows his time is limited. He knows Bible prophecy must be fulfilled exactly as written. So he's using well-meaning people, beneficial-sounding policies, and genuinely useful technologies to build the infrastructure for his final rebellion against God. The politicians who signed this law aren't evil conspirators. Most of them probably consider themselves Christians, but they're being used by spiritual forces they don't recognize to accomplish purposes they don't understand. What happens to those who refuse? But here's where the story takes a turn that most people never hear. While the world celebrates the convenience and security of the new economic system, those who understand biblical prophecy face an impossible choice. Take the mark and participate in the economy, or refuse the mark and face consequences that most people can't imagine. Let me walk you through what the Bible reveals about what happens to those who choose to refuse. Economic starvation. The first consequence is designed to break you psychologically before it kills you physically. Economic exclusion means you can't buy food, medicine, housing, or basic necessities. But here's what makes it particularly cruel. You get to watch everyone else live normally while you and your family suffer. The system wants you to see marked families eating while your children go hungry. They want you watching marked individuals living comfortably while you lose everything you've worked for. The emotional torture becomes worse than physical pain. Every day you hold out, your family suffers more. Every day you resist, life becomes more impossible. The pressure will be unlike anything you've ever experienced. But here's what the enemy doesn't want you to know about this seemingly hopeless situation. Divine provision. While the world's economic system shuts you out, God activates a provision system He's been planning for thousands of years. And the woman fled into the wilderness, where she hath a place prepared of God, that they should feed her there 1,260 days. Revelation 12:6.
Many seem to be confused because they do not understand the book of Revelation. However, what if there was an animation showing the entire book? Well, we created that. And to watch that, click here.
Where the Antichrist will come from, according to the Bible. You will be shocked when you find out the 3 strong theories based on biblical principles. Each theory is compelling on its own, but when you see how they could potentially merge into a single figure, well, let's just say it changes everything. Number 1, the European Roman origin. The first theory comes from one of the most detailed prophecies in the entire Bible, and it's been the dominant view among prophecy scholars for centuries. In Daniel chapter 2, we read about King Nebuchadnezzar's dream of a massive statue that represents the succession of world empires. Listen carefully to this description. This image's head was of fine gold, his breast and his arms of silver, his belly and his thighs of brass, his legs of iron, his feet part of iron and part of clay. Daniel 2:32-33. Now, here's where it gets absolutely fascinating. Daniel explains that each metal represents a different empire that will rule the world. The head of gold, that's Babylon. The chest and arms of silver, the Medo-Persian Empire, the belly and thighs of bronze, Greece under Alexander the Great. But then we get to the legs of iron. That's Rome. And notice something crucial about this statue. It doesn't end with Rome as we know it historically. It ends with 10 toes, part iron and part clay. What does this mean? The Roman Empire will be revived in some form, but it will be a mixture, partly strong like iron, partly weak like clay. It will be a coalition, not a single unified empire like the original Rome. But Daniel 7 gives us even more specific details that will absolutely blow your mind. Daniel sees the same empires represented as 4 beasts, and when he gets to the 4th beast, Rome, he's terrified. After this, I saw in the night visions, and behold, a 4th beast, dreadful and terrible, and strong exceedingly. And it had great iron teeth. It devoured and brake in pieces, and stamped the residue with the feet of it. And it was diverse from all the beasts that were before it. And it had 10 horns. Daniel 7:7. 10 horns, just like the 10 toes. But then Daniel sees something that changes everything. I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them another little horn, before whom there were 3 of the first horns plucked up by the roots. And behold, in this horn were eyes like the eyes of man, and a mouth speaking great things. Daniel 7:8. That little horn, with eyes like a man and a mouth speaking great things, that's the Antichrist. But notice something absolutely critical here. He doesn't conquer the Roman system from the outside, like a foreign invader. He doesn't come as an obvious enemy. He emerges from within the 10-nation Roman Confederation. And here's what makes this theory so compelling when you look at modern Europe. The European Union currently has 27 member nations, but many prophecy scholars believe we'll see a core group of 10 nations that will form the prophetic nucleus of this revived Roman Empire. Some point to the Western European Union, others to various European military or economic alliances that could evolve into this 10-nation confederation. Think about this for a moment. If this theory is correct, the Antichrist won't be some obvious dictator who seizes power through military conquest. He won't be the stereotypical villain that we can easily identify and reject. He'll be a legitimate European political leader who rises through normal democratic processes. He'll be elected, not conquered. He'll be trusted, not feared. He'll be part of the system we already recognize as legitimate international governance. Scholars like John F. Walvoord, J. Dwight Pentecost, and Tim LaHaye have argued for decades that this European Antichrist will be a master politician who understands how to work within existing power structures. He'll speak the language of democracy, human rights, and international cooperation. By the time people realize his true agenda, he'll already have consolidated power through completely legal means. But here's where it gets even more intriguing. The prophecy says he will subdue 3 of the 10 kings, not conquer, subdue. This suggests political maneuvering, economic pressure, or diplomatic coercion rather than military action. He's not just a conqueror. He's a brilliant strategist who knows how to neutralize opposition without appearing to be the aggressor. But hold on, because some scholars look at the exact same scriptures and see something completely different. What if we've been looking in the wrong direction entirely? Number 2. The Middle Eastern/Islamic origin. Here's where things get really, really interesting, and why some of the most respected prophecy scholars have completely reconsidered the traditional European view. When the Roman Empire fell in 476 AD, it didn't just disappear. It actually split into 2 parts centuries earlier. The Western Roman Empire, centered in Rome, collapsed under barbarian invasions. But the Eastern Roman Empire, which we call the Byzantine Empire, continued for another 1,000 years with its capital in Constantinople. Now, here's the detail that changes absolutely everything. That Eastern Roman Empire, which lasted until 1453, encompassed most of what we now call the Middle East. Modern-day Turkey, Syria, Iraq, Jordan, parts of Saudi Arabia, Egypt, all of this was Roman territory for over a millennium. But wait, it gets even more fascinating. When we read in Daniel 9:26 about the people of the prince that shall come, who would destroy Jerusalem and the temple, we automatically assume this refers to the Romans who destroyed Jerusalem in 70 AD. And that's correct. It was Roman legions. But here's the historical detail that most people miss. Those Roman legions were largely composed of Syrian and Arab auxiliary troops, not Italian soldiers. The historian Tacitus records that the 5th and 10th legions that actually carried out the destruction of Jerusalem were recruited primarily from Syria and the surrounding regions. So the people who literally fulfilled Daniel's prophecy about destroying the city and sanctuary were Middle Eastern, not European. If the Antichrist comes from the people who destroyed Jerusalem, wouldn't that point to a Middle Eastern origin rather than a European one? Now, here's where this theory becomes absolutely mind-blowing. In Islamic eschatology, there's a figure called the Mahdi, a prophetic leader who Muslims believe will appear in the end times. And the parallels to biblical prophecy about the Antichrist are absolutely stunning. According to Islamic tradition, the Mahdi will unite the entire Muslim world under his leadership, establish global justice, and eliminate oppression, rule from Jerusalem, perform miraculous signs that prove his divine calling. Sound familiar? Some scholars like Joel Richardson, Walid Shubat, and Mark Hitchcock argue that the biblical Antichrist and the Islamic Mahdi are the same person, a charismatic Middle Eastern leader who will unite the Islamic world and then use that platform to deceive the rest of the world. Think about the current geopolitical situation. There are nearly 2 billion Muslims worldwide, spread across dozens of nations. They're waiting for the Mahdi just as Christians are watching for the Antichrist. What if Satan's plan is to give them both in the same person? What if the Antichrist emerges from the Islamic world with claims of being the Mahdi, but with enough international credibility to also appeal to the secular West? But there's still a third theory that might be the most shocking of all. What if the Antichrist doesn't just need to deceive Christians and Muslims? What if his most important target is the Jewish people themselves? Number 3. The tribe of Dan, Jewish bloodline theory. This third theory is going to absolutely blow your mind. And it might be the most disturbing of all because it hits closest to home for those who think they'd never be deceived. What if the Antichrist comes from within the Jewish people themselves? Let me start with something that should immediately grab your attention. Open your Bible to Revelation 7, where John lists the 144,000 servants of God who are sealed from each tribe of Israel. This isn't just a casual list, this is God's end times protection for his chosen people. Go ahead and count them with me. Judah, Reuben, Gad, Asher, Naphtali, Manasseh, Simeon, Levi, Issachar, Zebulun, Joseph, and Benjamin. That's 12 names, right? But wait, Israel had 12 tribes, and one is missing from this list: Dan. The tribe of Dan is completely, conspicuously absent from God's end times protection. Why would God leave out an entire tribe? Why would Dan be excluded from the 144,000 who are sealed against the judgments of the tribulation period? This isn't an accident. This isn't an oversight. This is a deliberate omission that demands an explanation. Let's go back to the very beginning, to Jacob's prophetic blessing over his 12 sons in Genesis 49. When Jacob gets to Dan, he says something that should send chills down your spine. Dan shall be a serpent, by the way, an adder in the path, that biteth the horse heels, so that his rider shall fall backward. A serpent, an adder in the path. In biblical symbolism, what does the serpent represent? From the very beginning in Genesis 3, the serpent has been the symbol of Satan himself. But it gets worse. Look at the historical record of what the tribe of Dan actually did. In Judges 18, we read about Dan doing something that no other tribe did. They became the first to introduce systematic idolatry into Israel. They didn't just fall into idol worship accidentally. They actively sought out false gods, hired their own priests, and set up an entire false religious system that corrupted worship in Israel for generations. And the children of Dan set up the graven image, and Jonathan, the son of Gershom, the son of Manasseh, he and his sons were priests to the tribe of Dan until the day of the captivity of the land. Judges 18:30. This wasn't temporary backsliding. This was institutional apostasy that lasted for centuries. Dan became synonymous with false worship and leading Israel astray. But here's where this theory becomes absolutely terrifying. What if the Antichrist emerges from the tribe of Dan with legitimate Jewish bloodline credentials? Think about the strategic brilliance of such a deception. For Orthodox Jews to accept anyone as the Messiah, he must meet very specific genealogical requirements. He must be able to prove his descent from the tribe of Judah, from the house of David. No Jew who takes Scripture seriously would accept a Messiah who couldn't prove this lineage. The early church father Irenaeus, writing in the 2nd century, specifically taught that the Antichrist would come from the tribe of Dan. He wasn't alone. This view was held by many early Christian scholars who had direct connections to the apostolic tradition. And there's another disturbing detail. In 1 Kings 12:25-30, we read about Jeroboam setting up golden calves for worship. And where does he place one of them? In Dan. The tribe of Dan became associated not just with idolatry, but specifically with counterfeit worship that mimicked the true worship of God, but led people away from Jerusalem and the true temple. Could the man that Israel hails as their long-awaited Messiah actually be from the very tribe that has historically led them into false worship Could the tribe that introduced idolatry to Israel be the one to produce the ultimate idol, a false Messiah who will demand worship of himself? But here's the most disturbing part. If the Antichrist comes from within the Jewish community with convincing messianic credentials, he won't just deceive Israel. He'll also deceive many Christians. And this brings us to the most astounding possibility of all. What if we don't have to choose between these three theories? What if they're all correct? What if the Antichrist is a figure who somehow embodies elements from all three origins: European political heritage, Middle Eastern religious credibility, and Jewish messianic credentials? Now, here's where all three theories start to come together in ways that will absolutely astound you. How he will fool Israel. The temple deception. Now we come to perhaps the most crucial deception of all: how the Antichrist will fool the Jewish people into accepting him as their long-awaited Messiah. This isn't just another religious con game. This is the culmination of a 2,000-year wait, the fulfillment of Israel's deepest hopes, and the key that unlocks his path to global domination. Here's what most people don't understand about Jewish messianic expectations and why this deception will be so devastatingly effective. For an Orthodox Jew to accept anyone as the Messiah, that person must meet very specific, non-negotiable requirements that have been established by centuries of rabbinical scholarship and biblical interpretation. First, he must be able to prove his descent from the tribe of Judah. This isn't a suggestion, it's an absolute requirement based on Genesis 49:10. The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor a lawgiver from between his feet, until Shiloh come, and unto him shall the gathering of the people be. No one outside the tribe of Judah can legitimately claim to be the Messiah. Second, he must be from the house of David. Isaiah 11:1 declares, "And there shall come forth a rod out of the stem of Jesse, and a branch shall grow out of his roots." Jesse was David's father, so the Messiah must be able to trace his lineage directly back to King David himself. Third, he must be able to rebuild the temple and restore the sacrificial system. This expectation is based on passages like Ezekiel 37:26-28. Moreover, I will make a covenant of peace with them. It shall be an everlasting covenant with them, and I will place them and multiply them, and will set my sanctuary in the midst of them forevermore. My tabernacle also shall be with them, yea, I will be their God, and they shall be my people. Fourth, he must bring peace to Israel and establish Jerusalem as the center of world government. The rabbis point to Isaiah 2:4, "And he shall judge among the nations, and shall rebuke many people. And they shall beat their swords into plowshares, and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war any more." These aren't minor theological points that might be overlooked. These are fundamental deal-breaking requirements that any Jewish messianic claimant must fulfill. The question is, how could the Antichrist possibly meet these requirements if he's the ultimate deceiver? The answer lies in the sophistication of his deception and the desperation of Jewish longing. The real test will be his ability to enable the rebuilding of the Third Temple. And here's where current events become absolutely fascinating. Right now, today, in Jerusalem, there are organizations that are actively preparing for the rebuilding of the temple. The Temple Institute has recreated dozens of the vessels and implements needed for temple worship. They've woven the priestly garments according to biblical specifications. They've identified and trained men from the tribe of Levi who could serve as priests. They've even bred red heifers that could be used for the purification rituals required before temple worship can resume. The Adoret Kohanim organization has been working for decades to establish a Jewish presence in the Old City of Jerusalem, as close as possible to the Temple Mount. They've been buying properties, establishing synagogues, and creating a community of observant Jews who could support temple reconstruction. Some groups have even created detailed architectural plans for the Third Temple, based on biblical descriptions and rabbinical interpretations. They've calculated the exact measurements, designed the layout, and prepared everything except the actual construction. All that's missing is the political will and the security situation that would make temple reconstruction possible. And this is precisely where the Antichrist's political skills will come into play. Daniel 9:27 gives us the exact mechanism he'll use. And he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. And in the midst of the week he shall cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease. And for the overspreading of abominations he shall make it desolate, even until the consummation. And that determined shall be poured upon the desolate. He confirms a covenant, a peace treaty, for 1 week. In biblical prophecy, this refers to 1 week of years, or 7 years. For the first half of this 7-year period, 3.5 years, he will not only allow, but actively enable the rebuilding of the temple and the resumption of sacrificial worship. Think about what this means strategically. For 3.5 years, he will be Israel's greatest protector and ally. He'll provide the security guarantees that make temple reconstruction possible. He'll negotiate the political agreements that allow Jews to worship on the Temple Mount. He'll be the one who makes their deepest dreams come true. Can you imagine the gratitude, the relief, the overwhelming joy that the Jewish people will feel? For the first time in nearly 2,000 years, they'll be able to offer sacrifices in their rebuilt temple. They'll be able to observe the biblical festivals as they were originally intended. They'll see the cloud of glory return to the Holy of Holies. They'll believe that the Messianic age has finally begun. But there's more to this deception than just enabling temple worship. The Antichrist will also need to fulfill the expectation of bringing peace to Israel and establishing Jerusalem as the center of world government. And here's where his political genius will be most evident. Consider the current situation in the Middle East. Israel is surrounded by enemies who have sworn to destroy her. The Jewish people live in a state of perpetual anxiety about their survival. Now imagine a leader emerging who can somehow resolve all of these conflicts. Someone who can negotiate a comprehensive peace agreement that satisfies both Israelis and Palestinians. Someone who can neutralize the Iranian threat without military conflict. Someone who can convince the Arab world to accept Israel's right to exist and even to prosper. This wouldn't just be political success, it would appear to be miraculous intervention. When people see impossible problems suddenly resolved, when ancient enemies become allies, when the threat of annihilation turns into the promise of prosperity, they don't just feel grateful, they feel like they're witnessing divine intervention. And if this leader also moves his headquarters to Jerusalem, establishing it as the center of his international authority, wouldn't this fulfill the Jewish expectation that Jerusalem will become the capital of the world during the Messianic age? But here's where the prophecy becomes absolutely chilling. Jesus himself warned about this exact scenario in Matthew 24:15-16. When ye therefore shall see the abomination of desolation, spoken of by Daniel the prophet, stand in the holy place, whoso readeth, let him understand. Then let them which be in Judea flee into the mountains. At the midpoint of the 7-year treaty, after 3.5 years of being Israel's protector and enabler, The Antichrist will commit what Daniel calls the abomination of desolation. He will enter the Holy of Holies in the rebuilt temple, declare himself to be God, and demand worship. Paul describes this moment in 2 Thessalonians 2:3-4. Let no man deceive you by any means, for that day shall not come, except there come a falling away first, and that man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition, who opposeth and exalteth himself above all that is called God, or that is worshipped, so that he as God sitteth in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. Can you imagine the horror? Can you imagine the devastating psychological and spiritual impact? For 3.5 years, the Jewish people will believe they finally have their Messiah. They'll believe their greatest dreams are being fulfilled. They'll let down their guard completely. But the deception goes even deeper than this. Consider the psychological conditioning that will take place during those first 3.5 years. Every day that the temple stands, every sacrifice that's offered, every festival that's celebrated, will reinforce the belief that this man really is the Messiah. The longer the deception continues, the more invested the Jewish people will become in believing it. And there's another element to this deception that's particularly insidious. During those 3.5 years, the Antichrist won't just be Israel's political protector. He'll likely be involved in their religious life as well. And here's the final, most disturbing element of this deception. It will all appear to be happening according to God's plan. The temple will be rebuilt according to biblical specifications. The sacrificial system will be restored according to Mosaic law. Jerusalem will become the center of world government, just as the prophets predicted. Peace will come to the Middle East, just as Isaiah foretold. Everything will seem to be fulfilling biblical prophecy perfectly, until that moment when the Antichrist reveals his true nature and the greatest deception in human history becomes apparent. Can you imagine the horror? For 3.5 years, the Jewish people will believe they finally have their Messiah. They'll believe their greatest dreams are being fulfilled. They'll let down their guard. They'll trust completely. And that's precisely when prophecy tells us the Antichrist will reveal his true nature and strike with devastating betrayal. The man they welcomed as their deliverer will become their destroyer. The leader they trusted with their most sacred hopes will trample those hopes under his feet. The one they hailed as the Son of David will demand worship as the Son of God himself. Now we come to the climactic moment when everything unravels, when the greatest deception in human history collides with the sovereign power of Almighty God, and when the carefully constructed web of lies finally collapses under the weight of divine judgment. What happens next isn't just the end of the Antichrist's reign. It's the most spectacular display of God's power the world has ever witnessed. The prophet Ezekiel gives us a vision of how this all unfolds, and it's both terrifying and magnificent. But to understand what's really happening, we need to see how multiple end times prophecies converge into a perfect storm that will shake the very foundations of the earth. The trigger: Israel's false security. Here's where the prophecy becomes absolutely fascinating, because it reveals something that most people miss about the end-time scenario. The massive coalition that comes against Israel in Ezekiel 38 isn't just random enemies. Listen carefully to who's involved in this coalition. Son of man, set thy face against Gog, the land of Magog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal, and prophesy against him, and say, Thus saith the Lord God, Behold, I am against thee, O Gog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal, and I will turn thee back, and put hooks into thy jaws, and I will bring thee forth, and all thine army, horses and horsemen, all of them clothed with all sorts of armor, even a great company with bucklers and shields, all of them handling swords, Persia, Ethiopia, and Libya with them, all of them with shield and helmet, Gomer and all his bands, the house of Togarma of the north quarters, and all his bands, and many people with thee. Ezekiel 38, 2-6. Let's decode this coalition. Magog, that's Russia. Meshech and Tubal, regions in modern-day Turkey. Persia, that's Iran. Ethiopia and Libya, North African nations. Gomer, parts of Eastern Europe and possibly Germany. Togarma, more of Turkey, and possibly parts of the Caucasus region. This is a massive coalition of primarily Islamic nations, along with Russia and possibly other Eastern European powers. The Russian factor, Magog's ancient grudge. Russia's involvement in this coalition is particularly significant because it represents something deeper than just geopolitical opportunism. Throughout history, Russia has had a complex relationship with both the West and the Middle East. They've been Orthodox Christian, but often at odds with Western Christianity. They've been European, but never fully accepted by Western Europe. They've had extensive involvement in the Middle East, but have often been viewed with suspicion by Islamic nations. Russia might see this as their chance to fill the power vacuum. And there's another factor. Russia has extensive ties to Iran and other Middle Eastern nations through arms sales, energy partnerships, and strategic alliances. If these nations are organizing a coalition against the Antichrist, Russia might see joining them as a way to expand their influence in the region while settling old scores with the West. The timing of this invasion is absolutely crucial to understanding why it will be so devastating initially. Ezekiel emphasizes that this attack comes when Israel is dwelling securely, without walls or defenses. This isn't just about physical preparedness, it's about psychological and spiritual preparedness. When this coalition finally moves against Israel, it won't be a conventional military campaign. According to Ezekiel's description, this will be a massive, coordinated assault from multiple directions that threatens to overwhelm Israel completely. From the north, Russian and Turkish forces. From the east, Iranian forces. From the south, African forces. This isn't just one army. It's multiple armies converging on Israel simultaneously, with the apparent goal of completely destroying the Jewish state and eliminating the Antichrist's power base. But here's where human plans collide with divine sovereignty, where earthly armies face the creator of the universe, where the greatest military coalition in history discovers what it means to fight against God himself. Ezekiel 38, 18-23 describes God's response to this invasion. And it shall come to pass at the same time when Gog shall come against the land of Israel, saith the Lord God, that my fury shall come up in my face. For in my jealousy and in the fire of my wrath have I spoken. Surely in that day there shall be a great shaking in the land of Israel, so that the fishes of the sea and the fowls of the heaven and the beasts of the field and all creeping things that creep upon the earth, and all the men that are upon the face of the earth, shall shake at my presence, and the mountains shall be thrown down, and the steep places shall fall, and every wall shall fall to the ground. And I will call for a sword against him throughout all my mountains, saith the Lord God. Every man's sword shall be against his brother. And I will plead against him with pestilence and with blood. And I will rain upon him, and upon his bands, and upon the many people that are with him, an overflowing rain, and great hailstones, fire, and brimstone. Thus will I magnify myself, and sanctify myself. And I will be known in the eyes of many nations, and they shall know that I am the Lord. This isn't conventional warfare. This is supernatural intervention on a scale that defies human comprehension. God responds to this invasion with a great earthquake that shakes the entire land of Israel so violently that every living creature feels it. Mountains are thrown down, cliffs collapse, every wall falls to the ground. This isn't just a military response. It's a geological catastrophe that reshapes the very landscape. Confusion and friendly fire among the invading armies. Every man's sword shall be against his brother. In the chaos of the supernatural earthquake and the terror of facing divine judgment, the coalition armies turn on each other. Russian troops fire on Iranian troops. The coalition that came to destroy Israel ends up destroying itself. Pestilence and disease that sweep through the invading armies. Supernatural plagues that cause massive casualties among troops who thought they were fighting a conventional war against a small nation. Meteorological warfare on an unprecedented scale. Overflowing rain and great hailstones, fire and brimstone. This isn't just bad weather, it's divine judgment raining down from heaven itself. Fire and brimstone, like the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, but on a scale that encompasses entire armies spread across multiple countries. The result? Ezekiel 39:2 tells us, "And I will turn thee back, and leave but the sixth part of thee, and will cause thee to come up from the north parts, and will bring thee upon the mountains of Israel." Only 1/6 of the massive invasion force survives. 5/6 of the greatest military coalition in human history is destroyed by direct divine intervention. The cleanup, 7 months of burial. The aftermath of this supernatural destruction is so extensive that it takes Israel 7 months just to bury the dead bodies. Ezekiel 39:11-12 describes the cleanup process. "And it shall come to pass in that day, that I will give unto Gog a place there of graves in Israel, the valley of the passengers on the east of the sea. And it shall stop the noses of the passengers. And there they shall bury Gog and all his multitude, and they shall call it the valley of Hamon-Gog. And 7 months shall the house of Israel be burying of them, that they may cleanse the land." 7 months of continuous burial operations. Think about what that means. This isn't just cleaning up after a battle. This is cleaning up after the supernatural destruction of millions of soldiers from multiple nations. The scale of devastation is so enormous that it takes the better part of a year just to deal with the dead bodies. And there's another detail that's absolutely fascinating. They burn the weapons for fuel for 7 years. Ezekiel 39:9-10. "And they that dwell in the cities of Israel shall go forth, and shall set on fire, and burn the weapons, both the shields and the bucklers, the bows and the arrows, and the handstaves, and the spears, and they shall burn them with fire 7 years, so that they shall take no wood out of the field, neither cut down any out of the forests. For they shall burn the weapons with fire, and they shall spoil those that spoiled them, and rob those that robbed them, saith the Lord God." 7 years of burning weapons for fuel. That's enough military equipment to provide energy for an entire nation for 7 years. This gives us some idea of just how massive this invasion force was, and how completely it was destroyed. But the destruction of the Gog-Magog coalition isn't just a regional event. It's a global game-changer that fundamentally alters the balance of power in the world. When Russia, Iran, Turkey, and multiple other nations lose the majority of their military forces in a single supernatural event, the geopolitical implications are staggering. First, it validates Israel's God in the eyes of the world. Ezekiel 38:23 says, God does this so that he will be known in the eyes of many nations, and they shall know that I am the Lord. When people see supernatural intervention on this scale, when they witness divine judgment that defies all natural explanation, it becomes impossible to maintain secular explanations for what happened. What follows is the gathering of the remaining world armies for the final battle described in Revelation 16:13-16. And I saw 3 unclean spirits, like frogs, come out of the mouth of the dragon, and out of the mouth of the beast, and out of the mouth of the false prophet. For they are the spirits of devils, working miracles, which go forth unto the kings of the earth and of the whole world, to gather them to the battle of that great day of God Almighty. Behold, I come as a thief. Blessed is he that watcheth and keepeth his garments, lest he walk naked, and they see his shame. And he gathered them together into a place called, in the Hebrew tongue, Armageddon. The final battle, where every remaining military force on earth is gathered together for one last attempt to maintain human rebellion against God. But this battle has a predetermined outcome, and it's not in favor of human armies. And that brings us to the climactic moment of human history, when the false Christ finally faces the true Christ, when the greatest deception in history collides with ultimate truth, when the usurper meets the rightful king. Daniel 11:45 tells us the Antichrist's fate. And he shall plant the tabernacles of his palace between the seas in the glorious holy mountain. Yet he shall come to his end, and none shall help him. He establishes his headquarters in Jerusalem, right there on the Temple Mount, where he committed the abomination of desolation. But from that very place where he claimed to be God, he meets his end. And significantly, none shall help him. All his allies are gone. All his deceptions are finally exposed. How is he defeated? Not by human armies, not by political revolution, not by popular uprising. Revelation 19:19-21 describes his end. And I saw the beast, and the kings of the earth, and their armies, gathered together to make war against him, that sat on the horse and against his army. And the beast was taken, and with him the false prophet that wrought miracles before him, with which he deceived them that had received the mark of the beast, and them that worshipped his image. These both were cast alive into a lake of fire burning with brimstone, and the remnant were slain with the sword of him that sat upon the horse, which sword proceeded out of his mouth, and all the fowls were filled with their flesh. The true Christ returns on a white horse, and with nothing more than the word from his mouth, he destroys the greatest military force ever assembled. The Antichrist and the false prophet are captured alive and thrown directly into the lake of fire. No trial, no appeal, no second chances. This is the end of the greatest deception in human history. This is the end of Satan's final attempt to usurp God's throne. This is the moment when truth finally triumphs over lies, when justice finally conquers injustice, when the King of Kings and Lord of Lords takes his rightful place as ruler of the earth. And that victory, that glorious triumph of good over evil, that ultimate vindication of everyone who chose to remain faithful despite the cost. That victory sets the stage for the question that will determine the eternal destiny of every person alive today.